Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. My name is Mike Cromwell.
I'm Brian DeVault.
How do you, first off, quantify what some of the risks are in some of these areas? If you're new CEO coming into a business, how would you go about quantifying what your risk is in these areas? Where does cybersecurity management fit into my list of priorities of things I've got to do?
If you're a CEO entering the organization, you probably have some history in that industry, right? So you have some background on any compliancy requirements that apply to your organization. And so, I think the first thing you want to dig into, if we're just talking about cyber, specifically, is, work with your CISO, your CTO, your CIO, whoever has that list of responsibilities to review the latest information that you have, figure out what controls are in place, make sure that they're happening at a scheduled frequency, right? So are we doing this daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly? Like, how frequent are we doing this, and is that adequate? Based on the amount of risk that faces our organization. There's something else we haven't talked about here at all, but one of the the most influential factors in whether or not you become a target for somebody that's trying to breach your organization has to do with the size of your company and the amount of financial gain that they can achieve, by compromising your systems.
New executive into a business, how are you assessing risk and I guess it's the risk and the likelihood of getting attacked? Because certainly being high profile is going to put you at risk. Mm-hmm. It's also going to be, what's the value of the data? What's the impact to your business going to be?
Or the ransom.
And if you're a business you don't have a lot of these things in place,
right?
And a ransomware attack will shut your business down, like literally shut you down, which we've seen.
Sure.
What does that do to your business, to your clients? What's the cost? Because those things are proportionate to the likelihood that you're going to pay the ransomware.
Exactly.
What kind of questions would you be asking, Brian, if you stepped into a business as new CEO around how good of a shape am I in on these topics?
From working with me how much of a fan I am of scorecards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would look at each section of the business, each operational entity, I would say, and figure out a system, a consistent way to rate them according to a scorecard that says, what's my overall position, and take several things into consideration there, right? Like the level of operational security, maturity, right, within that department or that entity. The level of risk is obviously a huge one that's going to factor into the overall score. The impact to my business, if that entity were to cease operations, for instance, finance and billing, as affects my ability to collect receivables, that would be a huge problem.
Right.
Right. So, whereas maybe another department, marketing or what have you, if my business wasn't extremely dependent on it, might not have as much risk associated with it. Probably wouldn't. Right. But figure out some way that you can come up with a scheme or a matrix to assess what your risk was with each area of the business, and then attack it that way.
And what are some of the top questions that you start off asking?
A lot of it would be around compliance and control, governance, how frequently, who's doing it, who's responsible, are we auditing, are we signing off on things? I had a good friend that's in the industry tell me something the other day that I've been using on almost a daily basis since then, but the phrase he used was what gets measured gets done.
Love
right?
that saying.
And so if you're not auditing these various areas of the business, they're only as good as the line they represent on a piece of paper. Right? So if I tell you, Mike, hey, you're my new CEO, and I'm Brian, your CISO, and you come and say, hey, Brian, I'm concerned about all these areas, and I say, yep, Mike, we've got a strategy for all these. When was the last time you tested it? When was the last time you audited it? Can we see those results?
When was the last time you updated your plan?
Right.
When was the last time you...
Does it reflect the threats that exist in today's landscape?
Right.
Has this been tested by a third party?
If let's say that the last time they had their cybersecurity plan updated was 2 years ago, what's the level of risk?
Well, exponentially going to increase for sure, because risk 2 years ago doesn't look like it does today.
How often should businesses be testing their environment with a third party?
So what we're seeing most commonly right now is about quarterly. Have seen as frequently as monthly, but certainly are aware of organizations that do it daily. I would think that a lot of the large public cloud service providers, that's probably an hourly constant,
If you've got a CISO in place, chances are that CISO is going to own, you've got an infrastructure where you're testing that stuff every day, and you've got a dashboard that tells you
where your level of risk is probably doing this constantly.
Right. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to be over the course of the next few weeks talking about actions that you can take if you're an executive in a business, whether you're a CISO, a CEO, on the board, tactics and actions that you can take to both assess your current level of risk, as well as actions you can take to close the gap from being at high risk to lower risk and having a good cut posture in place.
You bet. So we're going to talk about business process, business procedure, discussions you should be having internally, and then hopefully we'll be able to get into some tactical tools and some platforms that you can use to help increase your cybersecurity posture.
And if you haven't already talked to an MSSP, reach out to Netrio. We are certainly here to help. And we can also walk you through what are things you got to look for if you're needing help today and you want to enlist an MSSP. Objective things that you ought to be looking for, tools that you can use to help assess your current level of risk.
Absolutely.
So thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's Whiteboard Wednesday.
Thanks. If you liked our episode today, click here to subscribe. And for other Netrio content, check out our channel.